there's a limit to the usefulness of effort in spiritual practice. Of course, effort is incredibly useful in other areas of life, developing skills, physical training, making money, etc. And that's why it's so hard to imagine that effort might actually be sabotaging your awakening. You're not alone in this. Most practitioners approach meditation like they approach everything else in their life, by trying hard at it. They read and reread books like The Mind Illuminated. They increase their formal sitting practice. They do silent retreats. But the effortless peace they aspire to seems as out of reach as ever. It turns out it's the reaching itself that's the problem. My student Ricky had been doing long, daily Vipassana meditations when we met, but he was hitting a wall he couldn't understand, because every other wall in his life he'd either smashed through or climbed over. So he made his sits even longer, but it wasn't working. Because this wall needs to be dissolved, and effort is not the right tool for that. The Buddha was very keen on effort, but even he said it had to go in the end. He illustrated this with what he called the simile of the raft. There are 3 stages to this simile. He spoke first about assembling the materials for making the raft. For you as the practitioner, this is the stage where you're sampling different teachings, reading a few books, checking out YouTube channels, listening to talks, maybe looking at retreat centers, trying to get a sense of what is necessary to even begin the spiritual practice. If you're a regular to this channel, you're long past this stage. Once you have your materials together, of course, then you have to build the raft. This is the stage of establishing a sincere practice. Learning to actually sit every day. Figuring out what it is that you're meant to do when you sit. And then getting to grips with what it is to do that practice each day. Maybe it's about beginning to implement a moment-to-moment mindfulness practice as well between your sits. It's also gaining the foundational knowledge of the view that is to be adopted. Once you've built your raft, it's time to set sail. Where are you setting sail to? Of course, you're setting sail to awakening, what the Buddha called the other shore in this simile of the raft. This is where you know what practice you're doing, you know how to do that practice, and now it's time to actually traverse the territory. So this is where you go deeper into your practice, you have insight, you learn about yourself, the mind, how it works, and how to, in a typical practice, make it better. Now, I have much to say on this idea of making the mind or making oneself better. That's covered in other videos. Maybe we'll get to some of it here. For now, we'll stick with the way that the Buddha taught this simile. Here in this 3rd stage, you're crossing the water, and this very often looks like working with the mind, training the mind, generating virtuous qualities, abandoning unwholesome qualities, etc. Developing skill in meditation. Finally, you reach the other shore, but awakening is not yet complete, said the Buddha, and here's why. Most people on reaching this other shore fall into a trap, which is that they've become so fond of the raft, given that it gave them so much, that they now hoist it onto their backs and carry it around with them. This is an illustration for what occurs when people become attached to their practice, attached to the teachings that they have followed. Perhaps even attached to all kinds of rites, rules, and rituals associated with the teaching and practice. And rites, rules, and rituals are actually the thing that the Buddha said must go first on the journey to awakening. Rites, rules, and rituals are dualistic. Most importantly, if you're attached to your practice, if you're attached to a teaching, you are not free. If you have to meditate for 2 hours each day to feel free, you are in a dependency. This is by definition not freedom. You may very well be more free than you were when you were attached to worldly things. This is a hell of a lot better than a cocaine addiction. But it is not freedom. Not if we're really committed to freedom, not if we're really sincere in our aspiration to awaken, to be free. Why is this important? Not only because it reveals rather than generates all these virtuous qualities that we practitioners value: peace, clarity, wisdom, happiness, compassion, benefit. Benefit not only for ourselves, but for others. We don't just awaken for ourselves. The world, now more than ever, needs individuals who are free of their own mental emotional baggage so that they can help the world with theirs. But it's okay to remain focused on yourself for the time being, to be focused on freeing yourself, on revealing these natural virtuous qualities in yourself. But this will not happen as long as you're dragging that raft around with you. And again, if you're a regular to this channel, then I'm speaking to you right now because long ago you assembled the materials for your raft. Long ago you put the raft together. And you may still be on the water. You may have come to the other shore. Either way, you are someone who is burnt out on the rowing or on the carrying of that raft on your shoulder. And so what does the Buddha say is necessary at this point? You must drop your raft. You must let go of the attachment to the practices and teachings that you've followed. And let go in the deepest sense of the word. Let go into immediate freedom, which is your nature. So what I'd like to do now is give you a taste of that by helping you to not smash through this wall, not try to climb over this wall, but rather dissolve both the wall and the person who's trying to smash it, trying to climb over it, or at least get a glimpse through these phenomena, get a glimpse through these things in terms of perceiving them as just a little bit more transparent. We could speak about it in those terms. So we're not necessarily looking for that, hey, you're going to follow this pointing I'm about to give and suddenly full-blown ego death and everything vanishes, leaving no trace. Though this is the nature of all phenomena, the key point here, the distinction, is whether or not you recognize that. So we're going to try to get some recognition going right here, right now. Eyes open, eyes closed, as you prefer. I'm going to close my eyes. And what I'd like you to do with me is consider those raft materials that you assembled and put together and sailed upon. All of the various teachings that you've encountered throughout your journey, all the various practices you've done. And consider that all of these came at one point. They had a beginning. At one time you did not know them, and then at another time you did. How fortunate. How fortunate it is for you to have encountered these teachings and practices. Wonderful. But you did encounter them. There was a time before them and there was a time after. They are things. They are stuff. They are phenomena. Even the most exalted teaching is a thing. It comes and goes, bringing great benefit. Nonetheless, it remains in the category of stuff. And as long as you're dependent on stuff, you're not free. Also, the you who went in search of those raft materials, the you who assembled them into a raft, the you who started rowing, the you who then, on reaching the other shore, hoisted the raft onto your back and carried it around. That you is also stuff with a beginning and an end. Now, of course, we can talk about the story of you, the character with a history. Of course, that's a thing made up of various mental emotional processes which are only ever occurring in the now. But we can also talk about each individual instance, each mind moment that represents a you. So think about an isolated instance in which you're assembling your raft, which of course illustrates perhaps you're reading a page of the Mind Illuminated and considering how to implement the practice that it's teaching. In that moment, a self is birthed, and it is a mental emotional process. That mental emotional process may trigger other mental emotional processes, and before you know it, you're telling a whole story about your history with practice and all of the trauma that you have to deal with and whether or not this practice will work. This is all stuff. Both the raft and the practitioner, and both shores, the worldly shore and the other shore representing awakening, and the water in between. This is all stuff. It is all phenomena occurring within the basic space of awareness. Try to deny this, if you please. Indeed, if you deny that the basis of all of this experience, yourself, the raft, the territory, is only known in, as, by, and through awareness, then please share that objection with me. This can be some of the most rich interaction that you can have regarding your awakening. If it doesn't seem to you that awareness is the basis of all of this? Tell me so in the comments. Tell me why, tell me how. Tell me what your experience is like when you consider this. But let's continue our inquiry for now. How is it that you experience yourself? How is it that you experience the raft? How is it that you experience the journey from one shore to the other? The basis of all of that experience is awareness. And awareness is not a thing. We have to give it a label in order to talk about it. But the best way to think of it is that it's like space. Completely open, without boundary, extending everywhere, containing, in a way of speaking, all of this experience that we're talking about. Every book you've read, every practice you've tried, every teaching or teacher you've sampled, every moment of meditation or mindfulness you've done is only known in, as, by, and through awareness. And this awareness is already free. This is the key distinction between dualistic and non-dualistic practice and view. Awareness, what you are fundamentally, is already free, already perfect. You cannot purify it. You cannot improve it. The relativistic practices that you've engaged in have their place, as long as you insist that you are an individual that is broken in some way and must be fixed. Then relativistic practices are wonderful, and indeed they can help us to see things that perhaps we wouldn't have seen on our own. The degree of relativistic practice that is necessary for each practitioner is completely individual. I spend a lot of time with students, figuring out with them how much and what kind of relativistic practice might be necessary, but always within the container of the non-dual view, always with the aspiration to let go of those relativistic practices just as soon as possible. So we use them as provisional means, kind of like a crutch, only for as long as it takes for you to see what is to be seen, which is that all you are and ever have been is this aware, pure space, spontaneous and without causes or conditions. Recognizing this is freedom. Recognizing this is to put down the raft, to finally be free, to see that every practice you've ever done was, in a way of speaking, an attempt to create what is already so, in that so many practices are concerned with creating clarity, purifying oneself, when what you are is already perfectly clear, always pure. Indeed, whatever seems to obscure clarity, whatever seems to be impure, is only known in, as, by, and through awareness. So friend, I hope this pointing helped you to at least taste, to glimpse what it might be like to put down the raft, to finally be free of even the need to practice or study. To go uncompromisingly to your direct experience and confirm what is true there. Again, do let me know how this went for you in the comments. Return to it again if you feel you need a round 2, a round 3, around 10, around 100. I give many of these pointings on this channel. Of course, feel free to scroll through those until you find one that strikes you just right. Follow your intuition for which pointings to repeat and which to leave alone. This is only the beginning. This, of course, is a one-to-many teaching in which the benefit that I can provide is limited. The next step for you, if you wish to go deeper, is to take my 1-minute quiz. There's a link in the description. This will ask you 3 questions about what your experience is like right now. And then I'll send you some personalized advice appropriate to where you're at in this whole picture of the simile of the raft. In following that advice, if appropriate, I'll offer you at least one way to connect with me and talk about your experience, talk about where you're at in your journey. Some of you I know have been on this journey for 50 years. Some of you have maybe been on this journey for 50 weeks. So personalized guidance is incredibly powerful here, so that we can really dial in on exactly what raft did you build and in what way did you row across the water. We'll have the chance to get more specific to you. I'll look forward to that. If you enjoyed this teaching, if you enjoyed this pointing, like the video, subscribe to the channel. This tells YouTube that you want to see more of them. I'll be uploading again very soon, and I hope to see you then.